Hi Noah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Hi, Caleb.
Awesome. All right, nice to talk to you. Happy World Environment Day.
Same to you. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. So Noah, it's good to have you. I'll just let me read your profile so everyone knows who I'm talking to. Noah Martin is a double Georgetown University graduate, completing a bachelor's degree in biology of global health, and then going on to complete a master's degree in learning, design, and technology. Noah has been working at the Designing the Futures initiative for 3 years, starting as project lead on the Core Pathways initiative, and now serving as a senior program designer, where he's responsible for designing new projects and monitoring existing projects, serving as um, design lead to integrate design processes to the work and ensure stable and thoughtful growth of emerging work. He also serves in a limited teaching capacity at Georgetown, beginning with co-teaching a course titled The University as a Design Problem in the fall of 2020. He's also the founder and creative director of FM31, a social goods company started in DC that makes high quality, handcrafted creative tools inspired by social justice issues. Thank you so much for joining us, Noah.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, you are supposed to be talking to us today around alternatives to learning in the classroom regarding ecology, particularly the topic teaching ecology beyond the classroom, and learning the way we learn to relearn how we're supposed to. Quite an interesting topic, if you ask me, because I have always been concerned about innovative methods of learning about the environment, about ecosystems, about ecology, about biodiversity. So I'll start with this question. With the rampage of the current pandemic, do you think it is time to transform our traditional learning modules? And if you think so, how can we leverage technology to bring about impactful learning accessible to everyone, regardless of socioeconomic status, particularly because of the work you do at Georgetown in this respect? So, do you think it's time to transform the traditional learning models with the current rampage we see? And if so, how can technology help to make that happen, regardless, and help you to reach everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic status?
Thanks so much. I think it's a great question, and I absolutely love the topic of this room, in part because I think it pushes us to really consider the question of unlearning in the process of thinking through what teaching and learning looks like on a sort of broader scale, both inside and outside of the classroom as an individual, but also brings up a lot of these questions about how we can think of institutions of learning and how they play a role in individual learning, both inside and outside the classroom. And just some more context to my work, I work at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. in the United States. I know we're coming from around the world. Most of my perspective is really grounded in U.S. higher education, thinking through universities at this sort of level. And a lot of my work focuses on trying to really reimagine how institutions of higher education need to radically change to meet this sort of a moment that's been building for a long time, but that is certainly amplified by this particular moment. So I think I would say, to start to answer that question, that we are way overdue to be rethinking the way that we're sort of thinking about education. And this moment in particular, I think, gives us a mandate to not just rethink education, but doesn't really even give us a choice to rethink it. I think no matter what happens, as the coronavirus pandemic evolves and changes and adapts, we're not going to be able to think about education in the same way after this moment. In the United States, pretty much overnight, all of the universities and colleges, and I think this is mirrored a lot around the world, went online, seemingly overnight. And it's a shift that nobody thought was possible. And if you had proposed it even 2 weeks before, everybody would have thought you were completely crazy. Like, why would you ever think that we could do this online? And how could we make this happen. And there are a lot of good reasons for that. There are a lot of really valuable reasons about why it's important to have in-person structured education that's focused and housed by an institution. But there are a lot of reasons why that shouldn't be the sort of end-all and be-all. And I think that when thinking about this question in particular, I think what makes this moment so valuable as a moment to think about changing education is that we no longer have to convey the urgency to everyone. It's always been sort of this first step is trying to convince people that there's a problem with the way that we learn and the way that we're educated. That work's almost already been done because the entire world right now is grappling with the question of rethinking how we are able to learn. So in some ways, this is a really interesting time to be asked to rethink how we learn, how universities, how schools rethink the way that we learn, and to try something different. So I think it's an opportunity in that regard. And the second part of your question brought up technology in a really interesting way. And I do think that we need to shift to be able to be more adaptive in technology, not just to use it as a video conferencing platform or to try to do the same thing that we do in classrooms already, but then put it online, but that we really need to actively rethink what it looks like to do education and to learn in an online platform, because it's a very different ecosystem, and what it takes to really have a meaningful engagement with a learner is a very different thing. And for us, I think that one of the biggest things that comes to mind is that no matter how much you're engaging in tech, whether it be on video conferencing platforms like this, or using Google Documents or any of the sort of larger technology tools we have, the most important part is to come to them with an amount of really true humanity, so that you engage with your students and with the organizations that you're working with a space of sort of that starting shared community. I think the most powerful thing that we can do when we shift online and to make tech truly a sort of equalizing force, as opposed to something that is, can oftentimes bring about more inequity, is that we need to build it upon a sense of community. Tech in and of itself is useful in expanding access, but at the same time, at least here in the United States, there's been a really stark sense of disconnect with technology, where there are places that don't have access to the same technology that other places have, and the United States in particular has standardized testing, all kinds of things that go across the country, and a lot of people don't have. They treat it all as the sort of same tech solution, when in fact learners are really spread out in the way that they're engaging with tech. Not everybody has a computer screen right in front of them. Not everybody has a cell phone right in front of them. Not everybody has the same access that others would be able to have. And I think it brings us back to some of the most principal pieces of learning. And the core is that you need to meet students and learners where they are in the process through the experiences that they're sort of engaging with, because everybody brings their whole experience and self into any learning engagement, and making sure that that is visible and engageable in the space of tech, I think, is really important in this.
All right, thank you very much for that. Indeed, your points are very valid. So my next question is around ecology and its focus on biodiversity. In her book, Adenike, the convener of this event, The Principles of Green and Sustainability Science, she points out that ecology focuses on biodiversity. How have ecologists around the world advocated for biodiversity, and what measurable impact has been achieved through this advocacy?
Yeah, I'll start by answering by saying I'm not an ecologist, so it's definitely an area that I have a little bit less experience in. So I would defer to other folks on it. But the way that I've always engaged with it, and the primary way that I interact with this, is through the need for storytelling as a space to bring about a lot of the important work that happens in the realm of ecology. I think there are a lot of places where biodiversity conversations have been distant in the way that they're sort of portrayed. A bunch of them that are super, common that come to mind are, images of polar bears that are sort of drifting out on icebergs in the middle of, a vast sea. And that is a really powerful and evocative image, but at the same time, is not super relatable to a lot of people. Not many people have ever fully interacted with a polar bear or had that sort of immediate interaction with what that circumstances looks like. So I think that the most powerful examples that I have seen are those that bring about a response that people really feel connects to them personally and individually. There's a really phenomenal person who I work with, Victoria Herman, who's the director of the Arctic Institute, who focuses on storytelling at a hyper-local level as it relates to, climate change broadly, but biodiversity as well included in all of this. And the way that she goes about it is by capturing stories of individuals and thinking through biodiversity loss at the level of community. So scaling down away from sort of these broader global images, which have their place and serve well in thinking about the conversation, but trying to hone in and be specific and focus on particular communities in the context of this. I think we lost Caleb here, but we got him back.
So yes, I heard your response. Indeed, those are valid responses to biodiversity, and I'm hoping that in the course of the event we'll interact with more people who can tell us how, from their end, they have been able to advocate for biodiversity and the impacts they've achieved. So my next question is this: ecology is among the oldest sciences of nature. What incentives are formulated to stir up the interest of younger generations to become ecologists? You say you're not ecologists, and that's fine. But so with respect to you, what incentives are formulated to stir up the interest of younger generations to understand and teach about ecology or teach about the environment amidst competing career courses?
I think this is perhaps like the most important question that was on the docket for this, because I think that this is a problem that's going to not go away overnight, and that's going to be incredibly meaningful in the context of everybody engaging with over the course of generations to come. And I think that the importance of getting younger generations to get on board and sort of engage with this and giving them meaningful routes of access to it, I think is incredibly important here. Some of the ways that we've gone about this in my work is one, by trying to make sure that institutions of higher education are aligning the work that they do specifically to the work of ecology and to broader sustainability efforts in general. A lot of higher education today organizes around trying to get you a career or position beyond that point, and decentralizes the issues that are sort of most impactful for the entire world right now, things like climate change. And I think that it's important and necessary to centralize those giant global challenges, these wicked challenges, in the central experience of a student going to university or to college, so that they align their so that no matter what they want to do with the rest of their life, they engage at some point in a meaningful way around the questions of ecology, climate change, and sustainability. So I think that making sure that our schools and our institutions are incorporating that into everything that they do is crucial. And I think that one of the ways that I've found most useful to do that, most productive in doing that, is to make sure that when we teach about climate change, about sustainability, about ecology, that we do it in a way that is multidisciplinary. That we're not just thinking about it from the perspective of an ecologist, but that we're incorporating all of the different layers of disciplinary thought into it. that we're thinking about it from a philosophical perspective, from a theological perspective, from a historical perspective, from the scientific perspective with the actual discipline of ecology, from a humanities perspective, and that we're weaving these together. One, because the questions that we're engaging with are so complicated and so challenging that they require a really nuanced approach to engagement, and they require a sort of complex and dynamic thinking to truly engage with. And I think the other benefit for that, and how it relates to getting younger generations involved, is that it puts ecology in the path of people going through all of these different disciplines. So even if you want to be a writer, it's important to think about the importance of writing in the context of ecology and environmentalism. So I think that there is a real power to thinking about ecology as it relates to all the other disciplines and engaging with those, especially in the hope of trying to get more people involved and engaged with it.
Oh, thank you for that, Noah. Good to understand that we need to look at a multidisciplinary approach, and in that light, we're needing everybody to be involved in the solution. My next questions are sort of follow-ups to that. What is the role of ecology in mitigating climate change, and how can ecological findings and recommendations, from research, from academic enterprise, how can it be incorporated into government policies to enact regulations for the environment and to combat climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the policy aspect of this is incredibly important, just because of the scale of which climate change action needs to happen, and the rate at which it needs to happen in order for us to have a meaningful impact on it. And I think that the role of ecology in the context of all this should really be front and center in the policy discussion. I know the United States, as of late, has had a lot of issues listening to our scientists and our ecologists and all of our sort of scientific leaders. But I think that the first and foremost place where it needs to be is that ecologists and the other scientific disciplines that are informing engagement with climate change need to be front and center in the policy decisions that are driven. They need to be informed by good and sound ecological work, and the other sciences that sort of inform these decisions, so that as we make policy changes that have tremendous broadband effect, that they're informed by the sort of scientific principles that are needed for this. So I think the first thing there is that we just need to listen to ecologists first and foremost, and make sure that we're engaging with them from a level that puts them front and center. The other piece here, I think that, again, coming back to, how policy is so integral to it, we're not really going to move anywhere in the space of climate change unless we have real and clear policy action that sort of causes a sort of broader impact on this. It's crucial that we bring in things like, thinking about really innovative ways of bringing policies, such as, the carbon tax that's been proposed in the United States a few times and in other countries as well. That we're thinking about how we're sort of giving incentives and subsidies for, businesses and other institutions that need to kind of get them up to speed on, meeting a lot of the different energy markers that are needed for, large building developments to be able to be sustainable. Just to kind of list a few examples. And there is good policy that's sort of going on right now, and there's a lot of really innovative things that are going out. I saw the slide deck that was floating around before I moved on, and some of the people on there, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for example, just has been a really strong advocate for the Green New Deal, which I think has a lot of really ambitious, really thoughtful policy actions that need to be taken coming forward. But I think it all starts from the need to have scientists, ecologists front and center in the conversation for it.
All right, thanks for that, Noah. I don't know if anyone listening has questions, but before we take any questions from the audience, I'll just ask one final question to Noah. Noah, how do you think authorities, government, stakeholders can equip teachers of ecology, of climate change, of environment to enable them perform their duties at a maximum capacity? How do you think that they can be equipped?
Yeah, I think, such a phenomenal question again. I mean, I was really, really thinking through these when I saw them before coming on. And I think oftentimes one of the things that's most important, particularly for governments when it comes to allowing teachers to be most effective, is that oftentimes they need to give them more space. Oftentimes, I think government regulation in education can be limiting in personalized instruction that sort of gets to a very clear space of catering to the students who are sort of what students are coming into the classroom and into the conversation with. So I think from the government perspective, it's really, really important that we move away from having too much oversight into it to allowing teachers to be really flexible in the ways that they go about teaching. And it's a really fine balance, making sure that everything is up to certain levels, and making sure that things are up to some sort of standard. But I think that it's a really interesting balance there. And I won't talk too much long because I know there are some other questions. But
I see a couple of questions.
We'll pause there.
So someone is asking. This is Sabika Shaban says, for school education, do you feel teachers have sufficient training in thinking innovatively and provided tools to do so? Is the teacher education meeting the needs of society?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. I think probably not is probably the apparent answer. I think it depends a lot. I think part of what's so interesting about this conversation today and looking at the other speakers is that there are people from all over the world, and different education systems think about this in really different ways. I think that at least from the United States perspective, which is where most of my experience comes from, teacher trainings and education around being innovative is typically not there. And when it is there, it doesn't really give space for teachers to really be co-creators and thinking through that discussion. And I think the bigger issue is that when you get back into the classroom, regardless of whatever teacher training there was, because of a lot of sort of government standardization around, especially K through 12 or sort of, elementary education, there is not a lot of flexibility in the classroom to change what you're doing. So even if you're able to think innovatively, you still have to meet standardized testing. You have to, get your students to a certain point. And the idea that, even if you're a flexible and innovatively thinking teacher to the extreme, I think a lot of times schools, once you get back to them, don't really have the flexibility to allow you to think about implementing that sort of innovation, I thought.
True. You make a good point there. Someone has a question now. Becky is online. Becky will be asking a question.
Hey, Becky.
Hi.
Hello, Noah. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've been actually enjoying the session with you this morning. Yeah, just a quick question. Coming from the ecological perspective, I've actually made some researches and realized that the environment is actually a kind of place that brings healing to people who are actually depressed. Yes, as such, it's being practiced through mindfulness. So I would love to know what is the plan of the ecologist with mental health workers to actually, bring this thing clearer to the picture, especially in this period of COVID-19 pandemic. Like, it's actually very, very important to push these kind of things on board to make the world a better place. So what is the plan of the ecologist, like bringing this in view? Because I'm very sure a lot of persons don't know that mindfulness, the place of the environment, is actually a very beautiful place to get healing to their worries and hope. So what is the world actually doing, the ecologist doing about that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Becky, and for being here. I'm glad you've enjoyed the session so far. I think that is such an important question, and I really just value bringing the thoughts about well-being and wellness into the conversation around this, because I think that it is so important to consider that in the space of mental health and the way that we sort of engage as activists in the space of environmentalism, and to make sure that that's a part of the way that we're sort of educating as well. You're absolutely right. We should be more involved and engaged with the environment in our day-to-day life. I think there's been a real sort of disconnect in our connection to the way that we engage with the environment just daily. You know, everything, even this moment, is filtered by a screen, which is really useful, because I can talk to you from from my breakfast dining area, and can have a conversation with somebody all across the world, with all of our different speakers and guests today. But it loses a bit that sort of interaction and immediate touch point with the environment and with nature. And I think that there are, a few ways that there have been, this has been popping up in education, and also just sort of more broadly. I think that there has been historically there are a lot of examples, like, Thoreau disappeared into the woods for however long as he wrote his book Walden, with a lot of emphasis on the need to being in nature as you engage with a lot of the sort of most challenging questions that we engage with. So there's certainly a lot of historical precedent for it. And I think that today there are a lot of really interesting, in my mind, some of the most interesting things have been where there have been spaces made by educators or by different health professionals to encourage people to be outside more and to be engaging in a sort of broader engagement with the environment. That has really started to resonate and I think take hold for people in this particular moment. I think because we are sort of stuck inside as the result of the pandemic, people are starting to yearn for a little bit more experience outside. So I think that there's some sort of precedent there that has been building. And my hope is that it's at the starting point of people being more connected with that and using it in a more meaningful and connected place to the thinking of well-being. But you're absolutely right. It is way more needed, and I think it's at the starting point of being something that is more prevalent in sort of conversations around health and well-being. But it's certainly something that needs to be contextualized there. Great question. I hope I did some justice answering it, but
Yes, thank you very much. Just in addition, for countries that actually do not have the practices of having trees and gardens in this period where we actually locked inside our houses, I think it's actually a nice way to actually propagate the point that houses, every individual should start coming about a garden in their compound, so that they're able to enjoy nature in their private zone. Because since the rule is you can't really go out there to meet with other people, you can't visit parks right now and other places. So I think it's actually very important to push it forward to the public, especially countries that have not cultivated this practice. Thank you very much. You've actually done justice to my question. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Becky.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Noah. This brings us to the end of our discussion. I think we had one more question, but it was very closely related to the question you answered previously. And it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. We look forward to conversing sometime in the future. And please give our love to those back at Georgetown. Stay safe and happy World Environment Day.
Happy World Environment Day to you. Thank you so much, Caleb. Thank you, Becky.